We are live and recording.
Thank you, Guthrie, and welcome to all of you. Since prior, just restating, we're having some technical challenges, which will have to work especially hard to make a hybrid meeting work. Committed to that effort, so I just thanks to you who are online, and especially to you who are here for this meeting. Yeah. Anyway, just want to welcome you, and we'll call this meeting to order. We want to do a roll call, Guthrie, and
Yes, thank you, Chair Heyman, Vice Chair Simnett. I will now call roll. Greg Heyman.
Present.
Emily Simnett.
Present.
Demetrius Davis Boucher. Michael Dembro.
Here.
Richard Devlin.
Here.
Helen Edwards. Arnel Fajardo.
Present.
Evelyn Coker. Devin Lawson.
Present.
Teresa Martinez.
Here.
Jen Proctor Andrews.
Here.
Mary Middleton.
Here.
Jennifer Smith.
Here.
Gail Yamasaki. Thank you. That is roll.
Is Gail online?
It does not appear yet. I believe she will be here soon.
Thank you. The first item for action is the approval of the May meeting minutes. Are there any questions or comments about the minutes? And we would entertain a motion to approve.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the meeting minutes.
Thank you.
Second.
Mr. Lawson. Thank you. All in favor of approving minutes? Some indication. Great. Good. Have that taken care of. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Next.
Okay, great. Commissioners Dembro and Devlin, just find a way to signal to us if you're unable to hear online. We'll do our best in the room. Again, as Guthrie said, we're working through his laptop microphone, so there may be chance for you and anybody else online to
I'm fine.
be able to fully participate.
Yeah, it's really for me. It's kind of breaking up, but I can follow it.
He's a little farther away than I am.
Yeah. Yes. It's having trouble getting across the Atlantic. Well, we'll do our best. Thanks, commissioners. Appreciate this is our third month in a row with a regular meeting. So this is one of our more intense stretches of the year for all of you, setting a day or a half day aside. And again, just really grateful for your service to the HECC and to the state. There's a lot happening in Oregon higher education and at the HECC. I will touch on a few items here in my report, and then we're obviously spending more time on House Bill 4124 update within this agenda, as well as the development of our agency request budget. So you'll hear much more about those significant items later in the agenda. A couple of your last couple of meetings related to the current state budget that I want to brief you on. One is the status of the Oregon Tribal Student Grant. And I have noted for the commission previously this spring, the fact that under current projections for continuing students for the fall of 2026-27, as well as new applicants for the Oregon Tribal Student Grant, we do not have enough funding within our current budget to serve all eligible tribal students with the full grant to which they are entitled. That is we have put out legislature. We were prepared to go to the emergency board legislature with $4 million students. We were directed instead to go ahead and notice are eligible, they will receive the grant next year. for the 26-27 year, and to prepare a request for a fall meeting of the emergency board for the funding shortfall. So it's not the ideal situation for us. We would rather have the certainty of the appropriation now. However, it's so the public messaging currently is that this program is as intended. It's will receive the grant, and we will figure out the funding for the legislature in the fall or winter of next year. So I think there's a strong level of commitment on the part of legislative leadership, the governor, and certainly our tribal government to ensuring this program is fully funded. I presented a couple of weeks ago to the Commission on Indian Services. They're deeply engaged and invested in this, and I'm optimistic at this point that the fully funded for the remainder of the biennium. Another item that we've been tracking is the situation at Southern Oregon University. Just needed request to the Legislative Emergency Board for the release of half of the $15 million appropriation that the 2026 legislature set aside to address the FY27, again, 2026-27 fiscal year, academic year budget shortfall at Southern Oregon University. We will present that request to the Legislative Emergency Board next week on Monday at the subcommittee, and on Wednesday at the full commission, assuming it's forwarded from the subcommittee. We expect the legislature to release that funding, and that will help to support Southern Oregon University. But all do that. Arlington. The main changes that will be required going forward was supported and launched by a consulting engagement that we had with consideration. We took those, directed the administration campus we presented their board adoption next week. So the that board meeting received a plan that again addressed the long-term future of the university under the balance budget going forward. So we're looking forward to seeing what they have come up with. Finally, I emailed you earlier this week about some important changes that we're making within the HECC agency, and I just wanted to say a few words about that. We are beginning a process of realigning, reorganizing how the HECC is structured and how some of our operational processes and culture evolves in the coming months and years. And I'll just give you a little bit more of the context for this, really as going back to the strategic planning work that you undertook a couple of years ago, and then the subsequent work that we've been doing with staff to try to support the commission's strategic plan, we've identified HECC identified an opportunity to update the way that we're structured at the staff level to better promote cross-sector collaboration, innovation, and efficiency in order to achieve our objectives. The current HECC organizational design really reflects the landscape that pre-existed the HECC, that predated the HECC, when there were separate state agencies for the administration of financial aid, for support for community colleges, for public universities, for workforce programs, for the oversight of private career schools and granting schools. And we've inherited that structure. We've put it together under the auspices of a single agency, but we haven't really significantly modified how those underlying programs were connected. So because our work and your work increasingly calls for stronger connections across education, workforce, community colleges, universities, requires strategies that really span these sectors and these programs, we are working internally to reflect that in how we are organized and how we operate. So starting in July of this year, we're making some changes. The focus, the changes are really about how we're organized at the upper levels of the agency's leadership. So we will move to a two-deputy model where I will be supported by a deputy director for policy and programming. That will be Ramona Rodemaker, her deputy executive director. And then I will be supported also by a deputy director for administration. And that will be Jim. Mona oversee the work that occurs today within our offices of community colleges and workforce development, academic policy and authorization, our Office of Student Access and Completion, and our Office of Research and Data, which will be renamed our Office of Performance and Strategy. Those offices will exist within, this vertical. Ramona will oversee, and that will help, we hope, to integration, coordination, and strategy within that wing of the organization. Separately, on the operation and administrative side, Jim will oversee our current functions related to operations. That includes IT, fiscal, we'll add HR to that, post-secondary finance and capital, the unit that Jim has been leading to this point. But we'll have a more integration to our operations activity as well. So that's where our staff are seeing the greatest sort of structural change at the outset. The other thing to note structurally is that our longstanding Office of Workforce Investment, which you have heard about from time to time, that has been particularly engaged in administering WIOA Title I and supporting the WTDB, that office is being discontinued as a big chunk of its staff moves over. That before, in conjunction with the governors to train for responsibilities that we need. Remaining staff in that office be housed within our community college office, or in several cases, continuing to work with Julia Plantoni, the director of the Office of Workforce Investment, in her new role, supporting Ramona as in a new position that we're creating for Julia, helping lead this integrated division of academic of policy and programming. That's a lot to hear. You did receive this week slides or materials that help sort of visualize this. We've also shared that externally. So anybody who has questions about this, sort of how it looks, trying to get your head around it or why, should please follow up with me or Ramona or Jim, and we're happy to share more about it. The final thing I'll say, I mean, we're this notion of better connecting and integrating the work really is driven by your strategic planning, which doesn't look at the world in terms of silos between community colleges, universities, grant aid, et cetera, but actually takes a strategic view of how to support learners and connecting them with their career and learning goals. We're also, besides the structural changes that I described, we're attempting to, over the next 6 months, develop more consistent administrative processes and procedures to support the realization of these visions, as well as a cultural change within our agency to better connect staff across all of our programs and all of our offices with this HECC goal and mission of supporting learners in wherever they show up, helping them achieve their goals. And this is not work it's not a switch that we can flip. It's not like a structural change where you can say, well, now you're reporting to someone. It's not. These are cultural changes. It's a much different matter. It involves continued conversation, engagement, activity, and But I'm really pleased and excited about the fact that I think over time we have already started to become an agency where more of our staff are connected with the global goals of this commission with the state of Oregon, even as their day-to-day work is often executing on a particular program, whether it's the Oregon Tribal Student Grant or the licensing of private career schools or the development of the reimbursement of capital requests, capital funding for colleges and universities, the myriad things that the HECC does. But we are, I think, building a culture here where every staff person feels connected to the overarching goals and strategies of the commission and of the agency. So that's all exciting and underway, and I'm sure we'll brief you from time to time on the progress. Don't spend with you a lot of time getting into the agency nuts and bolts, but because this is a beginning of some significant changes internally, I wanted to let you know that we're doing it. Thanks.
Any questions? I just want to, I said this already, but just appreciate the way in which you're thoughtfully thinking about the organization's structure in order to better sort of orient your strategic planning. I think that's evident in what you're doing. Kind of excited to see what happens with that. I appreciate it. I think it's great work.
I'll jump in on Chair Heyman, and I agree with him on that. And also, not for any commission purpose, but just to learn for myself. Actually, I'd love to touch base with you, the opportunity to share what that cultural transformation looks like.
Sure, happy to.
Thank you.
I will just note there are some folks still experiencing some audio difficulty. If folks could just speak a bit louder than a natural speaking voice. All the settings are maxed out. I apologize.
Okay.
Thank you, Guthrie.
Mr. Chairman, Guthrie,
Yes.
do you know if the mics that you're using are directional mics?
They are not. It is my laptop microphone.
Oh, okay. So I mean that each member is using, are they directional, or because what can happen many times is if they're directional and people move away from them,
Yeah.
they no longer pick up.
All of the room microphones are currently offline due to a statewide issue. And so we just have the one microphone for now. Folks are working on addressing the problem.
Okay.
Apologies.
Guthrie, I want to thank you for your adaptability in this situation. That is certainly not a problem that is due to anything on your behalf, and coming up with, just-in-time strategies for, allowing us to proceed. So I appreciate that. I want to thank you for that. We will move on to our, I believe it's guest testimony, but I have a question. Are we able to do this?
We should be able to with the audio you just heard.
Okay.
For folks that are remote or in person. First up, we have Mary Muller.
No. Guest testimony.
Excuse me.
We've invited testimony.
Yes. Yes. President Ho, Katie Ho, are you on the line?
I am here. Can you hear me in the room okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you. And good morning, Chair Heyman, Vice Chair Simnett, Commissioners, and Director Cannon. My name is Katie Ho, and I'm honored to step into the role of acting president at Portland Community College. Community colleges have shaped my entire professional career. In fact, I'm a product also of this higher education system in the state of Oregon. So this whole entire higher ed landscape has also been personally a big part of who I am and my journey. So I began my PCC journey more than 2 decades ago as an academic advisor. And over the years, I've had the opportunity to serve in student affairs, academic affairs, operation, and executive leadership. And through every role, one thing has remained constant: a commitment to expanding opportunity for students and strengthening the communities we serve. I'm joining you today from Portland State University, where I am chairing my final Academic and Student Affairs Committee meeting as a member of the PSU Board of Trustees. This experience has reinforced for me the importance of strong partnerships across Oregon's higher education system and the shared responsibility we all have to support student success. As I step into the role at PCC, I want to emphasize and reassure everyone on the commission and at the HECC that PCC remains focused on our core mission, creating opportunities through education. We know that every day students come to PCC seeking a better future for themselves, their families, their communities, and our responsibility is to ensure that they have the support and resources and opportunities necessary to achieve those goals. As Oregon's largest higher education institution, PCC serves tens of thousands of students every year. They're recent high school graduates, working adults, first-generation students, apprentices, future nurses, teachers, technicians, small business owners. They truly represent the full diversity of the Oregon communities and workforce. And I know that you all know community colleges sit at that critical intersection of affordability, workforce development, and educational attainment, whether we're preparing for the next generation of medical responders or semiconductor technicians, or helping students transfer to four-year schools, supporting future nurses and educators. We are all helping students build family-sustaining careers while helping employers meet critical workforce goals. At the same time, PCC remains focused on student success and improving outcomes by ensuring students have the support they need to persist, complete, and transfer and succeed in the workforce. And that work has never been more important. As costs continue to rise for students and families, community colleges remain and must remain one of the most accessible and affordable pathways to economic mobility. For many Oregonians, attending college close to home is what makes higher education possible. Tomorrow, PCC is going to be celebrating our commencement. We have over 1,000 students participating with us at the Veterans Memorial Coliseum tomorrow night. We are very honored to have Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici be our graduation speaker. But really, this moment is about our students. And every year, this is what reminds all of us, I think, of what all of these conversations are ultimately about: our people, our communities. Every graduate represents a story of perseverance, determination, and opportunity, and their success strengthens not only their future, but the future of Oregon communities and the economy. One of my priorities as acting president is to create the conditions for thoughtful and collaborative work across the college so employees and students and our partners can continue to shape PCC's future together. PCC's strength has always come from the people who care about this work, and I have great confidence in our ability to continue moving forward together in service of our students and community. We look forward to continuing our partnership with the HECC, the legislature, and institutions across the state as we work together to create opportunities for Oregon's future. I want to thank everyone for the opportunity to introduce myself. I look forward to working with you and being in support of our Oregon students and communities.
Thank you, President Ho. I want to welcome you to your new role, and I really appreciate you providing an introduction, because most of us didn't really know who you were, so this is really, really helpful. So thank you for taking the time to do this.
You're very welcome.
Chairman,
Yes,
I might.
Commissioner Lawson.
Would I be allowed to ask the guest presenter a question?
Sure.
President Ho, my name is Commissioner Lawson. I serve in the Community College Student Seat. I have two friends who currently attend PCC, and they are actually very hopeful about this transition. I just had one question, and that was, over the next 12 months, I'm wondering, what should this commission look for? What should we watch in PCC so that we know the stabilization is on track? And then what is the single most useful thing HECC can do during that window of time?
Thank you. I appreciate the question. I think what I would be watching for is that all of us internally are coming together and rallying around equitable student success. And what that looks like is through our shared governance process and through a lot of advocacy with our partners externally, with the legislature, And where I know we could all use the help is continued support around funding for community colleges, period. We want to continue to strengthen what we do and make sure we're focusing on completion, retention, serving our population. It's going to take all of us internally to do that. And we're hoping to really rally and partner with everyone around the table, like I said, internal, external, to make sure we're the strongest we can be.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate your time with us. We will now move on to public testimony. I do want to call your attention. There are a number of written testimonies that are included in your packet. So I hope you have had an opportunity to take a look at those as well. And I believe we have oral testimonies at this point.
We do. Thank you, Chair. I will also note I'm going to turn off the video in the boardroom. In addition to being run through the laptop, we're also running on a cellular just to use the bandwidth as best we can for audio. I'm going to give that a try. If folks can just announce themselves when speaking. And our first testifier is Mary Muller.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning, Chair Heyman and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Mary Muller, and I'm the Executive Director of the Coalition of Oregon Public Universities. Last month, we presented our consolidated funding request for the 27-29 biennium to the Funding and Achievement Subcommittee. Thank you again to the subcommittee members for their engagement and questions. Yesterday, the F&A committee discussed the HECC agency request budget, which included conversations around current service level, capital construction details, and the budget pipeline narrative. Historically, there have always been technical differences between the DAS-CSL calculation and the OPU's calculation of university-based funding. With 2027-29 comes both expiration of some state PERS site accounts as well as the expiration of the pension obligation bonds. Those simultaneous actions may have had a role in this cycle's gap in calculations. We recognize that the DAS-CSL always becomes the starting point for HECC agency request budget, and we are prepared to move forward from that starting point for the 27-29 conversations. I would also like to acknowledge and thank HECC for their thoughtful budget pipeline narrative. We agree wholeheartedly that Oregon should begin a multi-biennium process to increase additional public investment for public universities, state-based student aid, and community colleges. Oregon's public universities stand ready to work with you in advocating for this much-needed change. Like many of you know, the state of higher education funding has been decades in the making, and a series of choices that Oregon has made. We are hopeful with the governor's focus on economic prosperity that we can have serious conversation about setting our state on a path of economic growth and stability with an educated workforce to fulfill much-needed jobs. Furthermore, we believe the PUSF would require at least an additional $680 million investment to place Oregon at the national average for per student FTE state support for public universities. We look forward to working with the Commission to advocate for the much-needed resources and long-term approach needed for students and our institutions to ensure Oregon is investing in our communities, future workforce, and successful economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Abby Lee. Do you want to just go sit up there, maybe to be closer to the microphone?
Commissioner Heyman, Commissioners, Director Cannon. For the record, I'm Abby Lee, Executive Director of the Oregon Community College Association. And I want to echo what my good friend Mary Muller just shared about the budgets and the dramatic difference between what we presented last month and what you're looking at today. And just very quickly, I think because we shared with the Subcommittee on Finance and Achievement yesterday, that is very directly tied to some of the assumptions on the PERS side accounts. So as we look at that 10% difference, we welcome the state's attention to the longstanding needs that we have for PERS. We welcome any additional dollars, and we will direct those towards what I think we have laid out are some very critical needs across our state for community college funding. So we will continue to work with you on that. Second, I want to just give you an update on the workforce. We are really appreciative of CCWD Director Donna Llewellyn and Julie Pontoni's leadership with HECC and the Governor's Office on workforce health. All 17 community colleges are coming together on June 3rd to talk about the strategies for workforce Pell, to go back to their campuses with some plans and some next steps. So we, again, grateful for HECC's partnership in that process. And then finally, the reason that we are all here are students. So we have more than 13,500 community college students who will be graduating across stages this week to celebrate and recognize perseverance and accomplishments, and they have achieved degrees, certificates, and credentials. So again, I wanted to just point that out because that is the work that you have done and the success and the opportunities that you are championing across our state. And we are grateful for your support. Thank you.
Abby, that's a great reminder, just accomplishments of our students and going through commencement both at the community colleges and universities this time of year. It's really a great time. It reminds us what this is all about. So thank you for calling that back to our attention.
Thank you.
Andy Marahal. Andy Marahal. Jennifer Davis. Jennifer
yes,
Davis.
I'm here. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
All right, awesome. I want to thank you, Executive Director Cannon and members of the Commission for hearing us today. I am Jennifer Davis. I'm English faculty from Clackamas Community College, and I am urging you not to end state funding for developmental and pre-college writing and math courses. Without reimbursement from the state, our community colleges will not be able to continue offering pre-college courses in math and writing, which would deprive students of valuable support and instruction time that they need. I know what you might be thinking, that co-requisites could provide the same support and help students get through their college writing and math classes more quickly. And for some students, that will be true, which is why here at Clackamas, we will begin teaching co-requisite writing courses next winter. But learning doesn't happen overnight, and even with a co-requisite for support, there's only so much that students can learn in an all too short 11-week course. This is precisely why the Oregon Co-Requisite Work Group reported to this commission in December of 2024 that even once we implement co-requisites for writing and math, quote, a two-term pathway should remain an option, end quote. OEAC, the Oregon Writing and English Advisory Committee, has also advised the commission to continue supplying state funding for a limited number of courses below the 100 level. I urge you to follow these recommendations and continue funding pre-college level courses. While co-requisites will help some students, they are not a one-size-fits-all solution. I've seen the way that developmental courses can help our students succeed. Last fall, I worked with a student enrolled in our lowest level writing course. And when I asked him what he wanted to get out of our class, he said, I've never been good at school, and I'm just trying to figure out if I can even handle this or if I belong in college. Over the past year, our developmental writing courses have helped this student succeed. He's now passed 2 Dev Ed courses and is completing his first year college level writing course, Writing 121Z, this week. He's one of many students who have been successful not in spite of developmental and pre-college courses, but specifically because of them. Because these courses gave him time and space to develop new skills, build confidence, and see himself as someone who can succeed in college. If not for these developmental courses, he likely would have become overwhelmed by trying to complete too much information and cover too much material in a single term, a scenario that I've unfortunately seen play out far too many times. This is why defunding developmental courses will disproportionately harm the most vulnerable students, working parents, students from historically marginalized groups, neurodiverse students, and students who've been affected by trauma and mental health conditions. Please do not end state funding for pre-college math and writing courses. Our best path forward is to implement co-requisites and maintain funding for pre-college courses so that we can provide multiple pathways to success and support as many students as possible. Thank you once again for listening and for partnering with us in helping Oregon students succeed.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Guthrie.
Yes, next up, Kai Russell.
Hello, I'm here. I hope you can hear me. So thank you, members of the HECC, for allowing me this time to speak. I am Dr. Kai Russell, and I chair the English department and teach first-year writing at Blue Mountain Community College over in Pendleton. And I'm going to echo some of the same ideas that Jennifer just presented. Many of our students come to us from impoverished backgrounds that lack support for academic development. They are often first-generation students, and often the first even to have completed high school in their families. They often also have language barriers, which we can absolutely address, but not in a hurry. Those take some time to address and overcome. And I'm sure that you've all seen at least some of the alarming headlines recently about college students, and this is nationally, college students and their lack of literacy skills. Student reading fluency and comprehension are not in a good place right now. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, we're seeing the largest drops in reading scores since the 1990s. The National Literacy Institute says that 54% of literate American adults read below the 6th grade level. EducationData.org ranks Oregon 50th. That is dead last in 4th grade literacy. And it's well established by many studies that students who are below grade level literacy in 3rd or 4th grade very rarely close those gaps by college level. So this is not the time to try to cut the courses that help college students gain the skills they need most to be successful. I also agree that co-requisites have their place. I do actually believe in their effectiveness. However, they are greatest for students who are really close to college ready, but just not quite there. The ones who have these severe deficits are actually often harmed by co-requisites that try to kind of speed them through a process they are not yet ready for. Traditional DevEd courses allow students who need more time to build their college skills to be able to do so while also developing that college attendance habit, while developing that sense of identity as a college student. If we want to serve as many of our students as possible, we must keep some DevEd options funded for them. I believe in the community college mission of meeting students where they are with appropriate courses to get them where they need to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel Couch. Daniel Couch.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, commissioners and Executive Director Cannon. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Daniel Couch, and I'm an English instructor at Chemeketa Community College, where I run our campus writing center, in addition to my teaching duties that have included developmental writing. I'm here today, like my colleagues Jennifer and Kai, to respectfully oppose the proposal to defunding developmental courses at Oregon colleges and universities. However well-intentioned, the reality is that defunding these courses will do tremendous harm to the students who need them. Can and should we help vulnerable and underprepared students be more successful sooner? Yes. Can and should we reduce the number of students who spend time in developmental courses? Also, yes. None of that changes the fact that as open access institutions, our state's community colleges must and do enroll students who are so underprepared for college level work that they cannot be successful without significant remediation. Do we enroll students who do not speak English? Yes. Do we enroll students who struggle with basic literacy? Also, yes. We also help them successfully develop the skills they need to meet their goals, educational and professional. Today, I'm arguing on behalf of my developmental writing student who is now working on a PhD in criminal justice. I'm arguing on behalf of my developmental writing student who got a full ride to Willamette. Crucially, I'm here on behalf of the young woman who I worked with in the writing center last week, who has gotten herself off the street where she suffered violence I won't describe here and into a classroom. She can barely form a coherent sentence right now, and she won't be able to in 11 weeks, no matter how many extra writing credits or labs she's co-enrolled in. I know we can help her and that she deserves our help, but it will take time. We must maintain the option to serve our most vulnerable and underprepared students with developmental classes because otherwise they will not be served. English faculty all over this state stand ready to work with you, Please join us as a partner in the important work of improving our developmental education system together. Thank you.
Thank you. Nolan Mitchell.
Yes, thank you, Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Nolan Mitchell. I teach math at Chemeketa, and since 2004, I've taught 118 sections of pre-calculus, including 13 sections with co-requisite support, as well as 96 sections of developmental math and dozens of 200-level courses. I'm here today, like my colleagues, because I think co-requisites work, but I also know there are lots of students who need more than what co-requisites can offer. If I may, I'd like to show you something. This is a Rubik's Cube, and 12 years ago, I spent several months learning how to solve it. And after another year of practice, I was finally able to solve it in less than a minute. Last Tuesday, I picked it up off of my shelf and realized I had no chance at solving it. So I went back, I reviewed the steps, and after a bit of practice, I can now solve it again in just a few minutes. For someone like me, the co-requisite model works. But what if I was to give this to you, along with all the same steps, and asked you to solve it under the same time constraints? How would you do? If you don't know what F2L means or what R prime U prime does, then you don't need a refresher. You're not just rusty, you're starting from scratch. For many of our students, just-in-time review is all they really need to fill in those small gaps and to reactivate their prior learning. But there are also many students who are genuinely basically starting from scratch. For them, they need a course that gives them room and space and time to slow down and learn those basic skills step by step. I would urge you to continue funding developmental and pre-college courses in math and English that will help those students succeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Troy Taylor. Troy Taylor.
Hello, I'm here. Good morning, Executive Director Cannon, and thank you, members of HECC, for your time today. My name is Troy Taylor. I'm the director at Camp Magruder on the Oregon coast. We partner with Northwest Regional ESD to provide outdoor school for about 2,500 students every year. I'll start by saying I'm from Tennessee. I didn't get a chance to attend outdoor school as a sixth grader, and it is obvious to me that I missed out. Now, though, I work at a camp that has hosted outdoor school for decades, and I regularly meet former students of all ages who come back to our camp just to tell us stories about their time there. And I'm talking people from their 20s through their 70s. You can tell that the few days that they had left a lasting impression. And for many of them, it was a bedrock moment that persists throughout their whole life. And that's why I'm here. I want to encourage you to prioritize these experiences for future generations of Oregonians, because what Oregon created through outdoor school is extraordinary, and it's unlike anything anywhere else in the country. But after just 2 years of the funding cuts that we've experienced, along with rapidly increasing costs, that model is becoming increasingly difficult to sustain. The funding impacts have made many ripple effects, but one of my biggest concerns is that they're going to quietly erode our ability to maintain the standards of safety that we owe to our students. Training opportunities get harder to provide, staffing gets stretched, and necessary maintenance gets delayed. Just to give you an example, at Camp Magruder, I have 2 cabins with leaking roofs right now, and those leaks have caused mold in the sleeping areas. If funding were restored to the previous levels, I could replace those roofs immediately. But under current funding levels, I'll have to keep stretching their lifespan out, and students and their leaders will continue sleeping in cabins that need significant repairs. The Measure 99 mandate, the one that established outdoor school for all, it funds outdoor school through annual lottery revenue. And I want to be sure that that's clear, not through additional taxes. And that allocation that it established, it was successfully sustaining these programs before the recent cuts. It's a relatively small investment that delivers tremendous value. And I'm not just talking about for students, but also for rural employment, for camp infrastructure, the long-term and long-term health for these programs. And I also want to emphasize that Measure 99 passed with nearly 2/3 voter approval, which is like impossible. And in the last legislative session, the bill that sought to restore outdoor school funding, it attracted more legislative sponsors than any other bill. Outdoor school really matters to Oregonians. So as you consider restoring funding to the level envisioned by Measure 99, I also want us to just feel pride in this program. It's really something worth preserving. So thanks for your time and your consideration.
No, thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Susan Solofsky.
Hi, I'm here. Good morning. Dr. Cannon and commissioners, thank you for your service and the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm Dr. Susan Solofsky. I'm an ecologist, certified K-12 substitute teacher, and outdoor school instructor. My nature name is Pica. As an outdoor school instructor, I taught students how to use owl eyes and deer ears and other senses to get to know their surroundings. We practice these skills outdoors while sitting apart, quiet, and still before sharing what was seen, heard, and felt. Most students, when they tell me how they felt, it was calm, peaceful, relaxed, happy, and even comfortable. And scientific research confirms what the students are sensing. The benefits of paying attention to nature include lower heart rate and production of stress hormones, and increased memory retention and contentment. Furthermore, by paying attention to the outdoors, students are exposed to truth. That is, what their senses tell them about our shared environment, themselves, and each other. Thus, if we increase access to outdoor learning, we can enhance curiosity, empathy, and collaboration, and provide hands-on, real-world experiences that promote creativity, problem-solving, and teamwork. Skill development that cannot be duplicated with online learning and AI. So I'm here today to ask you to include 4% of lottery revenue, which is full funding for outdoor school, in your 2027-29 biennium budget. Funding that 67% of voters, including me, designated to support outdoor schools, immersive learning experiences, and programs that inspire and empower lifelong learners. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you so much.
Adrian Godshaux.
Hi there. Good morning, Chair Hammond, Vice Chair Sinat, Director Cannon, members of the Commission. Thank you for hearing public comment on behalf of all of these issues. And I'm here to tell you about why Outdoor School is possibly our best workforce development program in the state. My name is Dr. Adrian Godshaux. I am a biologist and I, excuse me, as tenured faculty at a community college, I value higher education. And the reason I became a scientist in the first place was my experience at Outdoor School. Shortly after my family moved to Oregon in 2002, I discovered the opportunity to be a high school leader at Outdoor School, and I saw firsthand the power of students experiencing wonder, as you just heard about, wonder from learning about a river in a real live forest. And from that moment on, I wanted to pursue a deeper understanding of that world around us and recreate those moments of awe for students for the rest of my life. And now, over 20 years later, I still credit Outdoor School for all of my professional success and my student success. Throughout my career, I've recreated as much of the Outdoor School program model in every classroom, conference, and team I've ever led. Over and over, I've found that that educational secret is to create a community around learning through experience by living it together. Students graduate, they're ready to take on and make a difference in their respective fields. So to harness outdoor school techniques is to invest in our workforce for industries in our state and country that desperately need revitalization. And for the past 3 years, I have been teaching pre-nursing students. And the 3 years before that, I taught agricultural consultants in soil biology. And so agriculture and healthcare are two industries that our state and country desperately need re-enlivened with passionate community members. That's what Outdoor School can offer. I have seen firsthand how outdoor School generates positive outcomes across job sectors, making Outdoor School the most effective workforce development program in the state. So as someone who cares deeply about the future of Oregonians, I ask you to approve and advocate for voter-approved 4% lottery funds to Outdoor School. And if you care about that higher education, which we all here are here to advocate for, I hope you will invest in that bright future. And when they get to college, as a second ask that I have, being a part of this council, when they get to college, may they have the full success from all of those pre-college classes that they need to feel successful in all of the classes that they get to. So I'm tacking on and seconding as a biology faculty at a community college. I am also advocating for those resources, funding that does not conflict with the Outdoor School 4% lottery funds. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
And just checking one last time, Andy Marahal. That concludes our oral testimony, Chair. Our system is back online. So we take a brief moment to condition back.
That would be great.
Okay.
Yep. Oh.
Okay, we are back online.
Thank you. Are we using the room system?
We are using the room system. Could we confirm that commissioners online, can you hear us all right?
Yes, very clear.
Great progress.
Hallelujah.
So, Guthrie, I was thinking we've frequently had gremlins in the system, but today we got to hear them.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did.
Glad to thank you for getting us back operating on the system. I don't know if anybody still is online from providing testimony, but I do want to extend a thank you for the time and effort you take to provide us that input. Public testimony is a critical part of our work, and appreciate that we're able to hear your voice through this process. So again, just thank you for all of you who took time to provide that public testimony. We'll move on to the consent agenda, which is item 5. There was only one item on the consent agenda, and that is item 5.1. It is approval for a program at Clackamas Community College, cybersecurity operations support with an associated applied science degree. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Chair, I will move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Commissioner Lawson. We have a second. Thank you, Commissioner Sinlin. All in favor of approving the consent agenda?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks to all of you. We will. We have completed that, and that is moving us on to a legislative report from Kyle Thomas.
Yeah, good morning, Commissioner Hayman, members of the Commission. Kyle Thomas, Director of Legislative and Policy Affairs for HECC. I'll cover a couple items today. I'll cover quickly the new revenue forecast that was issued last month, and also cover some items for the 2027 legislative session. So starting with the revenue forecast that was issued on May 20th, I think unsurprisingly, the economists have cited that there's some difficult geopolitical conditions going on right now, and that has caused them to revise down their growth expectations for both the labor market and the state economy. However, despite those softening economic conditions, action that the legislature took in the 2026 session has caused expected revenues to increase. So revenues are up about $345 million from the prior forecast, although spending is also up from the prior forecast because action the legislature took in the 2026 session also increased spending. So that's up $198 million, equating to a net positive ending balance, up $147 million from the prior forecast. And that is unlikely really to have any significant impact, I think, on the legislature's near-term ability to increase spending over the course of the next biennium. And just a process note, there are 4 more revenue forecasts that will get issued between now and when the legislature ultimately has to finalize its budget, which it does based on the May 2027 revenue forecast that comes out in the middle of the legislative session. Turning to the 2027 legislative session, the process of developing legislative concepts is an iterative one. That involves conversation with you, it involves conversation with the governor's office, partners, wash, rinse, repeat. And as a result of those conversations, I want to announce that the following concepts, I think, are not going to move forward at this time. The first is the concept to consolidate the Oregon Promise program. In conversations with the governor's office, we've determined it's not the right time to bring forward that concept, although I think owing to the data that we see relative to that program contrasted with the data relative to the Opportunity Grant, it is likely something that will continue to be in the policy development conversation for the near future. We will also not bring forward legislative concept on the House Bill 4124 report recommendations. Part of this is a function of timing. The recommendations for that report are not due until the middle of legislative session, and the way that the legislative deadlines work, it's likely that that bill would need to have legislative leadership intervention anyway in order to remain alive through the transfer of that bill to leadership-oriented rules committees or introduction by the Senate President or the Speaker. There's also a high degree of legislative interest, and we just heard yesterday in one of the kickoff meetings for this project that Representative Pam Marsh is going to have placeholder bills that deal with this concept. So our concept will not move forward. The concept is very much still alive for the 2027 legislative session. We will also not move forward with a bill to overhaul our private school authorization processes. This came down to, I think, really a function of staff capacity. There's a lot of work to do to overhaul those processes. That staff is a small staff that's also working on a concept to overhaul our student complaint processes, and it, quite frankly, is a bandwidth issue, and we've elected to prioritize the student complaint issue this time around. We'll revisit the process of redoing or overhauling private school authorization in a coming legislative session. Today, I was going to give you a detailed review of the Oregon Promise concept, similar to the detailed review I provided you last month for the proposal around an emergency student aid set-aside program. Obviously, I will no longer do that, given that concept's not moving forward. I will instead give you more modest updates on 2 of our concepts regarding modifications to sexual misconduct policies and services on campus and student complaints. And as a programming note, the next time you meet, I will hopefully be joined by the Transfer Initiatives Director, Lee Graziano, and we will review with you in detail the emerging concept that will make modifications to our transfer statutes and dual credit statutes. The majority of the proposed changes and recommendations have come out of the work of the Transfer Council. I'm not doing that today because we have sort of just in the last couple of weeks finalized what we would propose those concepts to be. And next week are going to talk about this list with the Transfer Council and have a more detailed conversation with them at their retreat in July. And we'd like to do that and gain that input before we come back to you with what we believe is likely to be a much closer to final idea of what that concept will be. So stay tuned for that. I'll talk now about the campus sexual misconduct legislative concept. So this concept comes out of primarily one issue, which is that campuses around the state are having a difficult time finding providers of certified confidential victim advocate services as required by the 2023 legislation. So about 1/3 of institutions in the state that are required to establish these partnerships under the 2023 law have been unable to establish agreements for those services despite their best efforts. And this problem is not likely to improve because federal funding has been reduced to community-based organizations that provide these services. The 2023 law also prohibited undergraduate students from serving as certified advocates, and that eliminated several successful existing institutional programs on Oregon campuses and reduced the availability of advocates to students on those campuses. So this concept is proposing to make the following modifications to the laws around this issue. And if you're asking why is this something that HECC is putting forward versus the institutions themselves, would be a reasonable question to ask because this is traditionally an institutional issue. That 2023 law did a couple of things. First, it established the Sexual Misconduct Survey Council within HECC to come up with the survey that institutions are required to administer on a regular basis. That 2023 law also gave HECC regulatory authority to establish policy around these advocate service requirements and other issues. So as a result, we have hired an expert on these issues and now sort of have that regulatory oversight capacity that naturally would lead into us being a natural developer of a legislative concept here, although we are working with the institutions on it. So we're proposing to do three things. First, we're proposing to allow institutions that are unable to find a qualifying victim advocacy services agency in the same county, which is the current legal requirement, to establish an MOU with that agency anywhere in Oregon. The alternative to expanding the reach that they can, expanding the geography they can look at in establishing the agreements, is that HECC issues them a waiver. And so no services are provided. So we're viewing this as a better alternative. We would, in conjunction with this, remove the requirement that partnering victim advocacy agencies must hold on-campus office hours. Again, owing to the geographic expansion, viewing some services being better than no services and a waiver. So students and employees would continue to receive advocacy services either virtually or at agency offices, but the in-person requirement would no longer be a guarantee owing to that geographic issue. And third, we would propose to reinstate the permission that undergraduate students can serve as qualified certified victim service advocates on institutions. We were previously considering other modifications. I had announced these to you a few months ago to the sexual misconduct survey requirements to exempt small institutions from that requirement, owing both to the level of effort and sophistication that's required to administer this survey in a sort of trauma-informed manner. And the reportability, the public reportability of some of the results, which when disaggregated would result in cell sizes that are just simply too small to report. We have decided with the, after further conversation with the council itself, the Sexual Misconduct Survey Council, not to put forward that idea and to continue to require small institutions to administer the survey. Are there questions on that concept before I move to the student complaints concept?
Any question?
I see Commissioner Devlin's hand, but he's on mute.
Can't hear you, Commissioner Devlin.
I still see his mute.
Are we able to manually unmute him? No.
Nothing there.
Commissioner Devlin, can you hear me? Chair, would you like me to wait, or would you like me to move and field questions at the end?
I think you proceed.
Okay, so I'll transition to the student complaints legislative concept now, unless there are other questions on this one. At the risk of speaking a little too colloquially, our student complaint governing statutes are a bit of a mess. Our authorities and responsibilities related to student complaints are, because of the way that HECC came to be, are spread across multiple state statutes, multiple areas of administrative rule, and unfortunately, some of these conflict a little bit with each other, and some of them conflict a little bit with federal law. We also lack mechanisms here at HECC to prioritize, dismiss, in some cases refer complaints. We lack clarity about what follow-up processes are required to occur when a complaint is referred to another agency. And so we have an environment where vastly different procedures are applied depending on which type of institution we're talking about. And that is certainly a transparency and oftentimes can be a fairness issue for students. We're also today required to give individual case-by-case attention to each complaint because we lack an ability to sort of summarily dismiss complaints. We also have a statutory expectation that every complaint triggers a full investigatory process. So we have really a ballooning complaints backlog that has developed in recent years. There are some other issues with the statutes as well. So our main complaint statute too narrowly defines school in such a way that it is not clear whether institutions that are exempt from our regulation otherwise are subject to our complaint authority. This would potentially cause a conflict with federal law, and that has potentially real consequences for the institutions themselves. Our statutes also include language that allows us to refer complaints to other agencies, but there's sort of a lack of clarity regarding all types of complaints and whether they can result in certain types of referrals. So we'd like to fix that issue. We also have statute that in some cases narrows complaints to students, but in other cases references the term persons. And so we'd like to sort of clarify the issue of who is eligible to file a complaint, really resolving that so that it's students that are eligible to file complaints, whether they are past, current, or prospective students, but really getting a handle on the population of eligibles there. So we're proposing to make several modifications. The first is we want to add some language that clarifies our ability to receive complaints related to institutions that are not usually subject to our complaint authority, but where we're contractually obligated nonetheless to receive complaints for those institutions. This impacts us through our participation in the NC-SARA agreement. That is a national agreement that allows Oregon institutions to participate in the national higher education marketplace so long as they are authorized and overseen by us. And conversely, it allows out-of-state institutions to do the same within Oregon if they are licensed or authorized in their home state. We want to create mechanisms that allow HECC to dismiss student complaints that do not meet a certain viability threshold. That would include when we can specifying reasons where we can channel complaints into compliance processes instead of triggering a full individualized student complaints process. And what I mean by that is there are certainly complaints where the student's academic career is at risk or involved, or there are discrimination and retaliation complaints. They're very serious complaints that the investigation analysis disposition of which would have a individual impact on that student's academic career. And there are other complaints where institutions may run afoul of some regulatory requirement, but that running afoul of that requirement in an individualized instance may not have impact. And so like many other agencies do, state and federal, we would sort of propose reserving those types of complaints to the compliance process and the licensure process. Hold them unless we see a significant pattern develop. Discuss them with the institution at the time of reauthorization or issuance of their license to operate, but not otherwise investigate them as individual student complaints. And obviously drawing that line, where you draw that line is very important. We're working on where to draw that line, but we'd like to establish that two-tier process. I mentioned we want to narrow the scope of complaints to from persons to student. We want to clarify that employment-related complaints are not actually complaints that are our purview. Those are the purview to the Bureau of Labor and Industries. We'd like to clarify our responsibilities with regards to discrimination complaints, including where we retain them, where we refer them to ODE, BOLI, other state agencies, to the Federal Department of Justice. Yeah, and I think I'll stop there. So there's a significant number of issues here that we're trying to work on in one comprehensive package. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner
Mr. Chairman, just a very quick question, but just an aside also. Guthrie is not the only one having technical problems. When you depend upon an iPhone to hear and view this meeting, and 2 or 3 calls come in at the same time, even if you don't touch the phone, it can literally upset everything. So I'm now back on totally. It's a very quick question. The reference in your notes to students being no longer eligible to serve as certified advocates. Can you just send me the reference to that legislation? I'd be interested in the legislative history of it, why that decision was made. Because I can think in many aspects, students may be amongst the best possible person to serve as an advocate. In many cases, they may possess as much background as a nonprofit employee has, particularly those that are in upper division and graduate programs in similar background areas. So I'd just be interested in the history of it, why they were prohibited.
Sure, I can, Commissioner Devlin, right off the top of my head, give you the statutory reference. I will follow up in email, but it's 350. The statutes in this area start at ORS 350.340. And I'll follow up with the
statute reference, or I mean the bill reference.
Yeah, there are 2 bills that have, there's the 2023 law, and then there's subsequent amendments. So I will send you both bill numbers. I don't have them off the top of my head.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Devlin, thank you. I'm glad we can hear you now. So, and
just a clarification.
Yes, Mr. Smith.
Commissioner Devlin referred to graduate employees, and they may still be eligible to be advocates. I think it's undergraduate employees that are not. I mean, I'm not employees, sorry, undergraduate students.
I think Kyle's going yes.
That's correct. The prohibition is undergraduate students.
Okay. I still have the same concerns.
Thank you. Commissioner Lawson.
Mr. Chair, could we direct staff to send that communication to the whole commission? I think that information would be valuable for all of us.
That'd be okay, Kyle?
Absolutely. I will send it to Guthrie to distribute.
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Kyle, thank you so much for the update and the detail that we don't get otherwise. I appreciate that. And we are going to take a break, and the clock's wrong, so it is exactly 10:15, which we were supposed to take a break, and we'll come back at 10:30. Thank you.
There goes the gavel.
Yeah, I gotta get one.
Yeah.
You were like exactly.
Yeah.
Impressive. To the second.
We are back in session, and we're going to be moving into item 7.0. I do want to just kind of remind us that these times when we meet, most of us meet face-to-face, is an opportunity for us to be perhaps engaged in a more interactive way. I think we all feel more comfortable doing that, not to, you know, I think technology, when it's working, helps those of you remotely to engage as well, so I'm appreciative for that. But I think the items, you know, that we're going into now are, I hope that you'll feel encouraged and invited to engage in, I think, interaction that will help us to better understand the issues that we're going to have to discuss. And the first one has to do with House Bill 4124. We've you know, had some discussion of this before, but now it's an opportunity to get more deeply into it. I do, if it's okay, I'd just like to.
Yeah.
We had our first meeting of this advisory group yesterday, and I am representing us on that, and I was just very encouraged for that first meeting. The people who are on that group are deeply interested and engaged in that conversation, and the initial consultants have been very helpful. With still another consultant to hire to take us to the next level, but just, you know, I came away from that feeling quite, certainly it's a challenge, but quite encouraged by the people who are at the table. So just wanted to pass that on to you. Director Cannon.
Yeah, thanks, Chair Newman. So the last you heard in depth from us about House Bill 4124 was not very long after the legislative session ended and the bill had passed. You heard from me and you heard from our process consultants at Oregon Consensus as they introduced the study that they were undertaking to advise us on how to implement this really consequential task for the commission. So I will review some of that, but focus primarily on what they recommended. The report is contained with their report, the Oregon Consensus report is contained within your packets. I will describe how we are beginning the work. Just as a reminder, this is your project ultimately. Under the law, under House Bill 4124, you have been assigned with the responsibility to make a report and recommendations to the legislature on the future of Oregon higher education. And I'll say a little bit more about the details of that here in a moment. So turning to the slides, I just, the bill directs the HECC to conduct a study of the condition of Oregon's post-secondary education system and develop detailed recommendations about the design, implementation, and operation of a viable and improved institutional framework for public higher education in Oregon. At the advice of the Oregon Consensus team, we're provisionally calling this project the House Bill 4124 Higher Education Revitalization Study. So we're still sort of shopping that with the advisory group and others, but I think that's probably where we'll land. And maybe 4124 will recede as we pass the legislative session and people don't have to hang on to more numbers to remember. But that is, it's, I think, helpful to have the bill since it does describe, you've got a link here, in some detail what we're supposed to cover with the study. And some of that is reflected on this slide. The HECC is charged with ensuring that the recommendations you make under this bill support access to post-secondary institutions for students across the state, that your recommendations help fuel regional and statewide economic development and employment opportunity, and that your recommendations help improve the financial viability of Oregon public higher education. And there's some of the sort of dynamics associated with that called out. In addition, so to get there, you are required to evaluate the distinct objectives and missions of each category of post-secondary education post-secondary institution, in consideration of several key variables identified in the bill, such as the populations of students that are served, the research intensity, and the geographic location, but a sort of mission profile for post-secondary institutions and sectors. And you are to identify opportunities for collaboration, restructuring, or integration within the post-secondary system. Those are musts. The study and the report must do those things. There's a longer list of things that the study may consider and make recommendations on. You are also required to consult with faculty, staff, students, and other partners from public institutions in the development of the report. There are 2 deadlines. The first is October 1st for a preliminary report. The latter is April 1st for a final report. And just to reiterate, our first steps upon passage of this bill were to engage Oregon Consensus, a program out of Portland State University, but has a statutory charter and serves the state as a whole. Engage them in interviewing and surveying or conducting focus groups with partners across the higher education landscape in Oregon and workforce and employment to advise us on the process for getting to this report with recommendations. So that's what I'll spend a little more time on now. Oregon Consensus completed that. Again, the report's in your packet. They got a scoping and design and assessment that reflects what they heard and sort of filtered through their experience running projects sort of akin to this, statewide, multi-party, different perspectives, very dynamic processes on a variety of issues, from natural resources to education. They produced recommendations, and we intend to follow their recommendations. So what you'll see over the next several slides as I describe our process really reflects what they recommended and what we are setting in motion what they recommended. As this slide notes, their recommendations were a reflection of a bunch of interviews, focus groups across a broad set of interests. Just this slide also notes there is another, and Greg alluded to this too, there is another contractor who we are in the process of hiring, and this will actually be the primary research contractor or contractors for the study. So Oregon Consensus did this initial scoping and design assessment, very much a process focused, right? Folks had a lot of things to say about their hopes for the outcomes of this study, but the questions they asked and the recommendations they made were really exclusively focused on process. We are in the middle of the selection process now. We had an RFP that closed last Thursday. We are in the midst of selecting a contractor for the research component of this, and that research and engagement components of this. We will be working very closely with that contractor to present ultimately an advisory group, which I'll have more to say about, and then finally the commission with possibilities for your report and recommendations. Oregon Consensus is staying on as our process sort of facilitator and an integrator for the work. So they completed this assessment, but they are staying on to support us in the process of engaging this work. All right, so some of what they heard, and again, these are just summaries and excerpts from their report, which you have in the packet. I won't read the entire quote on the left-hand side, but I will note a couple of things. An emphasis from some on taking a longer horizon view, looking holistically while simultaneously addressing some of the very practical and urgent needs of today. Folks who really want to balance a national perspective of what we can learn from other states with the Oregon context and a real desire to ensure that this process takes into account very locally or regionally specific conditions. Acknowledgement or a raising of trust gaps, and in this context, I think that particular quote, and it was not just one person, we're referring to sort of trust or lack thereof in the HECC and what we might produce, right? So there's a desire on the part of some of the folks that Oregon Consensus talked to build more trust and to feel more confidence in through process in the results that the commission brings forward. Oregon Consensus recommended that the HECC frame the project in terms of long-term system resiliency, focusing not only on today's practical and urgent needs, but also that longer horizon with an aspirational and holistic system view. So that's reflected in this working title, the revitalization study, framing. This is about building the long-term system resiliency. It's not about solving a particular short-term acute financial issue at a particular institution, right? We know those exist. You know, if you're reading the headlines, you know U of O, SOU, PCC, Portland State, right? There are challenges, acute challenges at many of our public institutions. This project is about building a long-term and resilient system for the long term. It's recommended that we take an aspirational viewpoint, that this is not simply about, you know, managing a crisis, but about improving Oregon's higher education system for the long term, acknowledging challenging external forces impacting the system, including Oregon context, not taking a one-size-fits-all approach. Some additional framing as it relates to this sort of notion about long-term system resiliency. It's recommended that we design the process to meet those primary directions from the legislature that I noted at the top. Distinct objectives and missions for our institutions and the sectors, identifying opportunities for collaboration, restructure, and integration, so really centering those must-haves from the bill, setting a clear direction and charge for this work, and working with an advisory group, additional ad hoc design teams, and the consultants to establish shared principles, co-learning, and where possible, co-creating options, right? So, not surprisingly, from an organization, a group called Oregon Consensus, there is a recommendation, an expectation that to the extent possible, we build consensus and generate consensus for the kinds of recommendations that we bring forward. I think the where possible is important. I think it would be unrealistic or inappropriate for the HECC to begin this project with an assumption or an expectation that what you produce in the end will be liked by 100% of the community 100% of the time, right? I think that feels like a bar that we may not be able to meet. But the notion that there should be, that this work should occur with a spirit of co-creation, co-learning, and ideally, high degrees of consensus, that's where we want to begin. Okay, so some thoughts, and I'll come back to the advisory group. Greg mentioned that we had our kickoff meeting yesterday, and I'll talk more about that as we get into some nuts and bolts of the process. But consultants. So as I noted, we closed an RFP last week on this research consultant. We did ask, or Oregon Consensus asked its interviewees about their expectations for that consultant. Folks emphasized the need for competency, for transparency, for trust. We should work with a trusted, visible, and engaged consultant who has experience in post-secondary education. So folks really emphasized hoping they would have specific experience in the Oregon context, that there would be direct engagement and shared sense-making with identified groups. So they're not off in a tower somewhere isolated, but they're actually engaging and talking, learning from Oregonians and engaging them directly, drawing from sources both inside and outside of the state. Additionally, a desire and recommendations that we be intentional and transparent in the recruitment and selection of contracted services. I'm happy to say more about the RFP, the process, and the selection process. That we keep the scope of the engagement broad enough to allow further guidance from the advisory group, potentially from the commission, and through potential contract amendments as we identify more clearly what areas of work we want to focus on. that we ensure the contractor can take an independent, objective, flexible, and participatory approach, treat them or see them as a supporting resource rather than a driver of solutions. This is a balancing. My perspective, there's a balance to be struck here. We are hoping, I believe, to receive from the contractor some inspiration, some advice, some recommendations, and I acknowledge and want to honor the view that many folks had that this project should not mean turning over our authority, our responsibility to an outside party and say, okay, just tell us what to do and we're going to do it, right? So we're looking for a dialogue, we're looking for support, and support can mean bringing ideas to us, but ultimately these are solutions, these are recommendations that you, as Oregonians, as the state's Higher Education Commission, will need to own. Similarly, combining outside research with Oregon's collective knowledge, there's obviously the context for House Bill 4124 includes the fiscal headwinds facing higher education and higher education institutions. Our interviewees emphasized, or some of them, that this can't or shouldn't be simply a budgetary, a fiscal analysis, right? This has to also consider deeper social and cultural forces and factors and sort of what we want and expect of higher education in Oregon. There was a recommendation that we consider working with more than one firm to meet this balance and serve multiple needs. Some additional sort of process considerations. So foundational principles, we handed to Oregon Consensus and you saw this, I believe, in your April meeting packet, a set of draft principles that attempted to reflect, I think, the HECC's perspective on the work that we're doing, not the solutions, clearly we're not there, but kind of principles that could serve as a common framework. And Oregon Consensus tested those with interviewees, received feedback on those, and has made initial recommendations on an updated set, a modified set of foundational principles. Broadly, there was a shared, an appreciation for that draft list, and there was appreciation for the importance of having some foundational principles that could create shared purpose and a kind of North Star. And we have a updated list of those shared principles on the webpage that we've established for House Bill 4124 on the HECC website. So you'll see those. The advisory group saw those yesterday, and we're hoping that advisory group will sort of take those and help to own those, modify it, or own them. Again, they're on the website, so you can look at them in detail, but just you will not be surprised to see that there is a real emphasis on using the student and community as the North Star. So this project is not understood primarily through or first through the lens of institutions. It's first through the lens of student and community. Other process recommendations. I think this first one's important for the commission to see and reflect on. HECC, you are encouraged to lead with purpose and position yourself as a collaborative partner rather than a compliance authority or a passive coordinator. Take that as you will. These are, again, this is what we heard from community, what Oregon Consensus heard from community, and invites you to consider. Participants in the process are encouraged to take a collaborative leadership stance, focus on interdependencies that exist across the system. Participants are encouraged to value and contribute to the collective effort that it will take to work together to find solutions. Okay, so getting a little bit more into the nuts and bolts, how do we actually do this? Again, following recommendations from Oregon Consensus, we have created an advisory group. There are 10 members currently. They represent four-year public higher education, the leadership of four-year public higher education institutions, so leadership of our public universities. That position is held by Mary Moeller, who testified earlier today, representing the Oregon Public University presidents. The leadership of Oregon Community Colleges, Abby Lee, also heard from, serves in that role on the advisory group. Education unions, so Adrian Mitchell, and these were nominations, these were self-nominated. So we basically, after creating this advisory group and establishing these positions, we invited higher education, four-year leaders, community college leaders, education union leaders to identify a representative for those positions. So to continue down this list, the education unions position is represented by Adrian Mitchell, who works in the community college and is a leader of the Oregon Education Association local there. Faculty, we worked with the Interinstitutional Faculty Senate and Ricardo Pellegrini Taboada, who is faculty at the Western Oregon University, was nominated by the Interinstitutional Faculty Senate for that position. Staff, higher education staff, we reached out to SEIU and Matt Swanson from SEIU will serve in that role. Philanthropy, Denise Callahan from the Ford Family Foundation, a longtime partner with HECC, is serving in that role. Workforce and economic interest, Duncan Wise, former HECC commissioner, and longtime president of the Oregon Business Council, now shifting into a slightly different role with OBC, but continuing to work for them. Will serve in that position. The HECC, your chair, Greg Heyman, is serving in that role. K-12, George Mendoza, superintendent of La Grande School District, also a board member at Eastern Oregon University, about to end his 11 years on the EOU board, but very knowledgeable, both K-12 and higher education leader serving in that role. And then community organizations representing underrepresented communities. Aaron Frazier from the Center of Black Excellence in Portland is serving in that role. We have invited Oregon's tribal governments to each, should they wish, appoint a member to this advisory group. We have not yet received nominations, although they are still welcome to, and I will be meeting with them tomorrow through our regular quarterly government-to-government meetings and re-extending that invitation. And certainly will be in partnership with them through government-to-government and potentially other mechanisms with or without designees on this advisory group. Finally, student member, we are setting up, separate from this advisory group, a student voices group that will kick off late this summer or in early fall, and expect that we'll get a student representative from that group once it's established to also serve on the advisory group. So obviously this advisory, I've emphasized the advisory group is important. I want to be a little clear about what it is. You've heard who's on it and what sort of positions they represent. It is intended to be a core collaborative deliberative forum that will be working closely with HECC staff, with our process consultants, so Oregon Census, but especially with our research consulting team helping to steer this project, ask questions, receive initial findings, potential recommendations, and ultimately be advising HECC staff on the kinds of material and recommendations that we bring to the commission for consideration. So it will meet roughly monthly for roughly half a day. I held its kickoff meeting yesterday. Some of those meetings will be held in connection with regional forums that we intend to hold in different parts of the state. Again, likely with our research consultants, but as a way to engage additional Oregonians in the process. Besides that advisory group, which will be a core sort of sense-making body and support of HECC staff and you and the work, we also expect to establish some design groups. This will be, depending on need, depending on the kinds of issues that are surfaced by the advisory group and the research consultants, we may end up having some specific practitioners, faculty, staff, students, institutional leaders, workforce folks, depending on what we're trying to accomplish with specific work streams, there may be ad hoc design groups created. I mentioned the Student Voices group will be offering stipends, and Oregon Consensus is putting a plan together for that group to meet starting in the fall. And we've committed to at least quarterly meetings of institutional finance and academic administrators groups. These would be your CFOs and chief academic officers from colleges and universities who will be engaging in this work on at least a quarterly basis. They'll likely be engaged in other capacities as well, but we will convene them quarterly for a review and feedback mechanisms. Final slide, and I'm sure there are questions and comments. In addition to the advisory group, the forums I've just mentioned, we will be creating other engagement channels. Our research contractor, the RFP also established that the research contractor should play a big role in engagement, right? Again, not to happen in a tower, but to be engaged with our partners. So you can expect, newsletter, website, or other standing email account, other ways for folks to engage. Commissioner Denbrough, with support from Kyle Thomas, is holding regular briefings for legislators to keep them informed. The first of those will be, I think, the week after next, or maybe it's next week, to sort of keep this large group of legislators who are quite interested in this project informed and give them some voice into it. I've noted the regional community gatherings that we're starting to plan, and then we'll have a project support team, really HECC staff, working closely with Oregon Consensus and the contractor to help organize, facilitate, and support those efforts. So a lot going on. This has been heavily process focused because that's where we are, right? If I had substantive findings or recommendations or theories to report, I would report those. I've been asked, what are you gonna say? What's the outcome gonna be? And I've tried very hard to say, I don't know, that's the point, right? So we obviously have, some hypotheses about the kinds of things that may need to occur within Oregon higher education in the years to come, but this process is designed to test those and develop new ones, and so I'm not prepared to say much more about what we may end up finding through the course of this work. We're just at the beginning.
Thank you, Ben. Commissioners, questions? Yes, Commissioner Smith.
I am concerned about the time we have. I wish we had more time for this item. Chairman, I wonder if you're flexible on this. I just have a few things to say.
Go for it.
And then maybe one. Timeline is, the first report, the draft report's due in October, and then I'm sorry, the second one is due.
April, quick.
Next year. Okay, so there's some time between the October. I mean, October is, especially if you're trying to get student voices through the summer, this is, I'm concerned, but I'm sure that's being addressed. Contractor, in a recent effort, SOU, I'll just be totally frank, I heard about Deloitte as much as as much as the report. So that, I would say, ended up to be a distraction to the end result. So the contractor really played an outsized role for whatever reasons in that process. So I'm kind of hearing that a trusted contractor is going to be really important. I know that Oregon Consensus, I think, is quite trusted resource, and they're going to do process, and that's good. But if we are going to have sort of a management-focused, neat and tidy, plug and play kind of situation, I don't think that would be a trusted process. So just throwing that out there. We don't want to be passive coordinators of this process as HECC, as the HECC board. And I wonder, Chair Hammond, your role is going to keep us from being passive. You're going to be sort of venue for us to share. You're going to get back to us, and so you'll be our point person in that ad hoc. But beyond that, wondering how we'll be engaged besides just receiving the end result information. So that, maybe that will be between October, and I think there'll be more kind of an iterative experience.
Well, I appreciate that question, and I think we're, I need to be attentive to communicating with you. I think bringing something at each one of our meetings to give you an update, to engage your thoughts. I think from the conversations that we've had here, plus my own thoughts, I think what I have done so far is to try to say that the commission is not locked in on any specific answer to this, but is very interested in having a broad perspective on the kinds of things we might look at in terms of best positioning ourselves for the future. So we're not saying, oh, this is going to be the solution or that. And that's because that's what I heard in our conversation here.
And finally, one last thing, this doesn't need an answer in this moment, but on page 8 of the report, I saw that HECC should be setting realistic sideboards, or no, setting realistic sideboards with guidance from HECC. And in this context, I don't know what that phrase means, setting realistic sideboards. Just more information later.
Let me just say what, not to respond to all of that, but the question of the deadlines, because this has come, especially the October 1, that's come up in almost every conversation about this project. And so I've attempted in every one of those conversations to sort of lower expectations, including with legislators, for that October 1st report. It is, the bill describes it as a preliminary report. It can be whatever we are able to and feel comfortable reporting at that point, including simply a report on process, right? Here's where we are. We've hired this contractor, we've tasked them to do the following things, they've begun, we've received some initial findings, but we are not prepared to make recommendations, right? That would satisfy, legally speaking, that would satisfy the legislature's requirement that we issue a preliminary report. We've begun the work. That's that. So, is there some hope from the governor's office and the legislature that by October 1st we would have more substance to say than that? Probably. They would like us to have this job done yesterday. But, we'll do what we can do, and certainly given the summer, it will be challenging to be very far along by October 1st.
And you heard, an issue of establishing trust as being a critical thing we've heard, and so we want to be very careful not to get ahead of what the advisory group together is thinking. So, Commissioner Watson first.
I just had a general question about the consultant scope. So I'm wondering if it'll include the resident versus non-resident issue we're seeing, and then the affordability to enrollment relationship. Some of my fellow commissioners, including myself, raised at yesterday's FNA subcommittee meeting. So those analysis, I wanted to make sure that those land in October's preliminary report, especially because Vice Chair Sinnet touched on the U of O issue yesterday in our FNA subcommittee meeting. So the Commissioner Kendall, so I just think that would be really important for us.
Thanks, Commissioner Lawson. I certainly think enrollment dynamics are part of the context here that our contractor will be looking at closely. They relate to demographics, they relate to what other states like California are doing in higher education, and they have a big impact on where we can expect to be in the years to come, and then what can be done about it, right? So I don't know, it'll depend very much on who we hire and the approach that they take, but I would assume that those types of enrollment dynamics will be part of the analysis.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, if you'll allow me just two quick follow-ups. So on slide 13, Dr. Cannon, it talks about the process considerations. HECC is encouraged to lead with purpose and position itself as a collaborative partner in the process, so forth. I'm wondering if we as the commission could receive consultation or advice on how we might do that, rather than just take it as we will.
I welcome, I think this is, I'm here to serve, you are the commission. I welcome your guidance on how you feel like you can position yourself in response to that recommendation.
Can I just say something that's sort
Yeah,
of
maybe
related to
yeah.
that? And that was my question or comment, was just thinking about in the space between October and April, and thinking about how our meeting space is often very jammed and gets especially jammed during the fall. It feels like I just am wanting to make sure that we have opportunities to fully discuss this, and if that means either other kinds of meetings that are not just the regular HECC meeting, but I mean, is it possible for us to have conversations as a commission that are, publicly noticed and all of that, but yeah, instead of trying to cram it into we've got to cover, we have other obligations. I'm just thinking about creating opportunities that are scheduled and work with people's schedules to have conversations and to receive information once there is more than just the process.
I echo that. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that's, one of the things Director Cannon said at the meeting yesterday is just a recognition that if I got it right, but I think you said something like in all your time at HECC, this is one of the real opportunities for us to really engage. This is the biggest, most important in some sense, and I don't want to discount any of the other things, but this is a real opportunity. So we want to make sure that we create structures that allow us to be fully, I think, invested in this process. So I appreciate your I think, reminding us of that. I do want to get to our, I think the next one is Commissioner Yamasaki.
Great, thank you, Chair. So I do want to reiterate that I too listened to all the public meetings with SOU in regards to the consultant, and it was very disconcerting to me, the gap between what was going on. So I hope that we are real intentional about who we choose as our consultant. The other thing, there's a couple of things. I'm hoping that once you decide on who the participants are going to be on this, that we might get a list of who they are. The other thing would be, as documents become available for the committee to review, I really would appreciate having access to those documents also, because they will be drawing conclusions from those documents, and it might be helpful for us to know where those ideas originated from, I guess. And the other piece would be, as the focus groups are formed around the state, it would be helpful to know where they are in case some of the commissioners might want to attend to see the process working firsthand. And I would also support the idea that we have some time and sessions to be able to discuss some of the findings that's going on, so that we can be a little bit more intentional and strategic about our thoughts as we get the recommendations. That's it.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't sense any, I think all of that is inappropriate. So I thank you for that. Let's see, I think Commissioner Deborah.
Yeah, thanks. I want to support everything that the other commissioners have said about, seeking ways for us to stay engaged in this process as a commission. And, I would suggest pursuing special meetings where it's, the sole source of topic. Not everybody's going to be able to make every meeting, of course, but they'll be recorded, and that would be a good way for us to stay engaged. And, I'm not sure if it is the advisory committee, are they meeting publicly with minutes? If there are minutes, I think it would be a good idea to, send summaries to the commissioners as well. And I do want to say about, concern about the October deadline. We often, we that I used to be part of, often put things in bills, that kind of thing, calling for an initial report, just to be honest, just to make sure that the process is happening. We create requirements for studies, and sometimes they take many months to get off the ground. And so having that deadline for a preliminary report helps, just to create some urgency to make sure that, committee members are appointed and the process is moving along. I do want to, again, compliment you, Ben, for getting this thing going right after, as soon as, if not almost before, the legislative session ended, because this is going to be hard work, and it's really great to see it moving along. One piece that I've talked about in the past that I think is also needs to be part of this is a strategy for engaging individual institutional board members in this process. I think it would be very helpful to create forums bringing together board members from different colleges and universities, perhaps to meet with us and to meet among themselves to hear about this work. So that, the key thing about this work is we're thinking about Oregon as a whole. We're thinking about Oregon, what Oregon needs as a state, as an economy, and as individual students and potential students, as opposed to institutions. Obviously, the institutions are the deliverers, but in that effort to overcome silos and to create more of a sense of partnership and common effort, finding a way to bring those board members, I think, would be very helpful. And so that would be my suggestion as well.
So just one thing in response to a piece of what you said, Commissioner Nemmer, which is we did create the advisory group in a way that we felt would promote and allow them to have candid conversations and build trust. So I will leave it at that. But the structure of the advisory group is very intentional and designed to support their ability to build a strong sense of trust and have candid conversation.
Appreciate that clarification. I would also wanted to just a thought that sounds like there's an appetite for some additional opportunities to be engaged with this work as a commission, or at least updated on it. But I think once we establish our advisory schedules, maybe we could coordinate something where we could have some online meetings and follow up with those.
We can absolutely work with you on a special meeting schedule or taking additional time out of commission meetings.
I think we can create. I really appreciate the emphasis that you've given to wanting to engage. I think that's very better than the opposite, which would be, oh, just tell me when you're done. And clearly that isn't the attitude we have as a commission. I appreciate that. So, Commissioner Devlin.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you will hear later in some of the presentations some words about the budget and their implications. But I think their implications are also important to this issue. We often will hear these terms that we're going to be facing a difficult budget this next biennium. I think that's only half the explanation in a sense. And I know that in the case of the work we're doing here, it's extremely important. and that we need adequate time. We need the process to be inclusive. We need the commission to be involved. But we also need to maintain momentum in the governor's and the legislature's consideration of these issues. And they're not going to really face a difficult budget, as in the classic sense of a difficult budget. They are going to face a decision that's going to be very difficult for many of them to make. We all know that the state is very dependent upon federal funds. We all know that education receives a significant amount of federal funds, and so do some other entities. But the vast majority of federal funds go to human services and healthcare. The legislature's budgets have been based in past biennium on certain levels of federal funding. Those levels are going to be significantly lower given the current administration. And they are not going to even potentially probably change, even if there is a change in the interim elections between this year. The legislature is going to have to make fundamental decisions about providing human services and healthcare. There is no way to probably piece this together. So legislators, former Senator Dembro and I have both been in the legislature at times when we've cut budgets. Very few have been that are left in the legislature have been during those times. They're going to have to probably make fundamental decisions that we're going to require cuts that are significant, particularly in healthcare and to some extent human services and perhaps in other areas of the budget. But there's no way to piece this together that I can see by just finding money on the state level. It's going to, and during this process, I think it's going to be very difficult for the legislature, and we need to find some way over this period of time, which is the time is necessary to maintain the momentum on this discussion into the following biennium when most of the decisions hopefully can be made at that time.
Thank you for that. Yeah, Commissioner Fajardo.
Yeah, as we talk about process considerations, this is a highly complex topic, a number of variables and a lot of affected groups. And I guess one thing that I'd like to suggest is that either Oregon Consensus or kind of a steering committee plays this process forward and kind of comes up with potential risk factors where we say like, hey, what would happen if 3 years from now we get to a bad outcome? What is that bad outcome? What is the risk of that happening? What's the severity of that happening? And how do, most importantly, how would we mitigate that? How do we build in the right structures, process in advance so that we can address those risks? Because I think with the example of SOU, I think that's been brought up. So that could be a potential risk. But what are some other risks that we could potentially address with the right processes up front?
No, I appreciate that input, and I would just say I think those are the kinds of things that this next consultant I think will be very critical in helping us to understand. I don't think there's any outcome of this work that isn't going to have risk, and I just think the extent to which we're aware of that is critical. So I really appreciate your input there. Really, I think as our director Canada has already said, we're not able to talk much about content yet, and but really we're just talking about how do we make sure we have the process in place so that we're fully invested and fully involved, and this input is I think really helpful to me in terms of understanding how to sort of turn that into action as we go through this work. It's going to go very, very fast. There's no question that this is extremely short timeline for a really complicated task. So I'm engagement at a lot of levels. I really appreciate Ben's comment on the construction of the advisory group. I think for example, we have Mary and Abby as a part of the advisory group, which creates opportunities for a pathway for board involvement. I just think each member of the advisory will function as a pathway to an interest group, and we just want to make sure that we're very supportive of that, recognizing that, and utilizing that. So I think I've heard a lot about that. We're gonna move on. Do you have one more?
It's yes or no for Director Cannon. I was just wondering if we have any statutory or administrative authority over picking the contractors that we do our business with.
Can you clarify the question?
The contractors such as Oregon Consensus, I'm just wondering if HECC has any authority over picking, like us as commissioners, getting to decide from a list maybe of who those people are rather than just staff for the agency. I don't want to get into the details of like management.
Yeah.
Just asking.
It would not be practicable for a public commission to uphold Oregon procurement law and be selecting contractors. I think it's just not, at least I can't envision how that would take place. So procurement authority is among the delegated responsibilities that the commission has delegated to staff.
Thank you.
And the process is somewhat prescribed.
Yeah, I will say we do have, our selection process includes on the scoring committee 3 of our advisory group members, Mary Mueller, Ricardo from IFS, and Duncan Wise, as well as 3 HECC staff. And there's we're following Oregon procurement code and the approach that we take to that. We hope to have a contract executed by early July, and you'll be on the first tool here. How do we adjust?
Thank you so much. Thank you, all of you. This has been a great, I think, informative conversation. I think it helps us to, more refine steps going forward.
Yeah, can I give you an agenda suggestion, given the timing?
For sure.
Okay, I am going to suggest, and this will, I'm sure disappoint Veronica and Anthony, but I'm going to suggest that we delay the conversation about the public university evaluation summaries until our next regular meeting in August. So we skip item 8.1. Encourage commissioners to review those summary evaluations in your packets and let me know by email if you have feedback, questions, concerns. Those are the basis for the longer, sort of 30-ish page evaluations that you will be asked to approve. But the core, the sort of summary core of those is contained within your packet. And that we move to item 9.1, which is our report from the Funding and Achievement Subcommittee.
Assuming that nobody, is radically invested in the item that we're going to delay, we will move forward with that suggestion. And therefore, Vice Chair Simon.
Okay, I will make my report brief because we do have upcoming on the agenda review of the agency request budget, which was one of, I would say, a primary focus of the Funding and Achievement Subcommittee yesterday. So I do want to note that we had a discussion and a presentation of the ARB yesterday, and that we will also have a version of that today, and an opportunity for commissioners to ask questions and comment on that. That is a big, we're in the thick of that process and are required to make a recommendation by August, which is our next meeting. In addition to that, the subcommittee discussed the financial sustainability reports for the community colleges and the public universities. And those are related to financial monitoring that is ongoing, and the purpose of those is to support statewide policy making. So we had a good conversation around those sustainability reports, and that is, I believe, where our conversations about changing enrollment patterns at the public universities came up in University of Oregon specifically, but thinking about changes between residents and non-residents and the effect of changing regulations and changing enrollments or feasibility of enrolling international students in undergraduate and graduate programs. So that was a central part of our conversation. We've already heard reference to that, and I'm pleased to hear that that will be taken into consideration as we plan for the future. And then in addition to the ARB review, we also had an update on the SOU situation. You've already heard, I believe, like a good summary of in Director Cannon's report. I was not present for that discussion because I had a conflict. So I'll ask Chair Heyman if there's anything that you would like to add about either or anything on the agenda.
I think there's a general concern, and the process that we're in, focused on at the moment was the authorization which you as a commission gave to some supplementary funding to help that school make it through the current biennium, and I think we're still looking at what the plan is beyond that biennium, but I don't have any additional information there. So.
Thank you. The only other thing that I would mention, and I believe this has actually come up in this meeting, is the agency request budget pipeline that was prepared as part of the materials for yesterday. I really, if you have not taken a look at that, if there's one thing that you review in from the funding and achievements packet, I would recommend that you review that. It provides some context and is helping us think be forward thinking as we are, even as we are in a budget situation where we've been asked to not request any additional support. So with that, unless there's anyone else who was at that meeting yesterday on the subcommittee, or I think we had some maybe some visitors, some other commissioners who joined us. If anyone has anything to add.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Vice Chair Simnett. I just have one sentence in support. The current fund balance data for the colleges that Vice Chair Simnett requested yesterday in our meeting is the same data that this commission needs before the August budget adoption. I would like the record to show that a second commissioner is asking for it, and I would perhaps a recommendation that we should meet next month as well for the full commission and FNA, if at all possible.
I believe we're ready to move on to our next item, which is a workforce Pell implementation update. Julia? Online.
I do see that Commissioner Dembro has his hand up.
Okay, thank you for redirecting me.
Sorry.
It's okay. Commissioner Dembro.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add that we had the benefit yesterday also of a lengthy presentation on current service level from Jim Pinkard, which was really very helpful. And I think that information is in your packet for today as well. And I would encourage people to look at it, as well as the narrative, the pipeline narrative on the review of the agency request budget, which talks about sort of a long-term funding request, that whether or not we can make progress this legislative session, we hope we can. This is a multi-biennial kind of approach that we really need to be taking.
Yeah, thank you for reminding us of that. And Commissioner Devlin.
Yeah, I would just like to echo Commissioner Dembro's comments and also add, just for the full commission's knowledge, as you all are aware, we were anticipating a full review, not necessarily changes, but a review of the CSL process, the methodology. For various reasons, that did not occur. We are going to be having some discussions with the CFO and DAS. I met with our staff and with the new analyst that has been assigned by DAS to higher ed or HECC on June 3rd, and we're meeting with the CFO and DAS for a short period of time on the 17th, basically trying to continue this discussion, because although I think there are going to be a lot of broad discussions on the future needs of post-secondary education in the state, at the core of that still is going to be funding. And at the core of that is still going to be how you calculate what the need is. So we're just hoping to continue this discussion. And I think particularly issues like the pipeline documentation is going to help in that, because even if we forward the adjusted budget, most of the members of the commission knows it will not achieve what we hope to achieve.
Thank you so much for that, and I appreciate your continued focus on that issue. So now I think we move on to Julia and Workforce Pell update.
Let me just get my slides loaded. Right. Good morning. Again, I'm Julia Pontoni. I'm the Director of the Office of Workforce Investments at the HECC. As you may remember, back in December, I provided an orientation briefing on Workforce Pell to the Commission, and now I'm back to provide an implementation update. These first few slides you saw in December, so I'm going to move pretty quickly through them, but I wanted to provide a refresher on Workforce Pell, and please feel free to jump in if you do have questions on these. As you know, Pell grants are federal grants that help students offset the cost of higher education. And to be eligible, students must have exceptional financial need. They must not have already earned a bachelor's, graduate, or professional degree, with some small exceptions. For Workforce Pell, learners can have earned a bachelor's degree. So that's the only difference between student eligibility between traditional Pell and Workforce Pell. Students must also have earned a high school diploma, GED, or the equivalent, and be a citizen or eligible non-citizen. And then for the traditional Pell Grant program, students can use those grants for programs that are offered by an accredited institution of higher education that's been approved by the U.S. Department of Education, and programs that are undergraduate degrees or credit-bearing certificate programs that are longer than 600 clock hours and are delivered over at least 15 weeks of time. Workforce Pell is an expansion of the Pell Grant program to shorter term workforce training programs offered by the same accredited and approved institutions of higher education. But the programs that qualify, that students can use Workforce Pell Grants at, must meet a stricter, more rigorous set of criteria that you see listed here. They need to be aligned with the job requirements of high skill, high wage, and high demand industry sectors or occupations. They must meet the hiring requirements of employers in those sectors or occupations. They need to be stackable and articulate as academic credit with few exceptions. They need to be portable across more than one employer. And they have to be between 150 clock hours, but less than 600 clock hours. So again, 600 clock hours and above is when regular traditional Pell counts, and then below 600 clock hours, but above 150 clock hours is sort of where the Workforce Pell Grants fit in. And they need to be delivered over at least 8 weeks, but less than 15 weeks. They also need to have been offered for at least a year and have a completion rate of at least 70%, a job placement rate of at least 70%, and the cost of the program can't exceed the value added earnings of completers. So what is the governor and HECC's role in Workforce Pell? Like traditional Pell, we don't have a formal role in the learner eligibility and award side of things. So determining whether a learner is eligible and getting the funds to that learner. We do have a role in determining program eligibility. We're required to define certain eligibility criteria that you saw on the last slide, to develop and publish written policies related to approving programs for Workforce Pell, and then to develop and implement a program approval process. These are those same program eligibility as on 2 slides back, but they show you what the state is, which of those criteria the state is responsible for further defining and then assessing programs against. So it's these ones in the green box, everything except for looking at the program cost to value added earnings and whether or not the institution is approved by the Department of Education. So here's a snapshot of where we are on implementation. Back in December, as I said, I provided an orientation to you all and also to the Workforce and Talent Development Board, the State Workforce Board. And we executed a contract with Echo Northwest to conduct the 2026 Oregon Talent Assessment. That talent assessment was published in May and included recommended definitions of high skill, high wage, and in-demand occupations and industries for use as eligibility criteria for the Workforce Pell program. HECC staff have also been meeting regularly with a group of community college liaisons to share information and hear feedback about potential eligibility definitions, hear what they're struggling with and what their concerns are and what successes they've had, et cetera. And we have drafted required policies to further clarify the program eligibility, what consultation with the State Workforce Board looks like, and to have the governor formally designate the HECC as the responsible agency for approving Workforce Pell programs. We submitted those recommendations of high skill, high wage, and in-demand occupations to the governor's office, as well as the additional recommendations around designating the HECC and consultation with the State Workforce Board. And once we have approval from the governor, we'll run a brief public comment period for some of those policies to allow a broader array of institutions and partners to provide feedback on our policies. We've also been working really hard to develop an online program approval portal where institutions can submit programs and HECC staff can determine their eligibility and approve those at the state level. Those will then need to, once we approve them at the state level, the U.S. Department of Education has final approval. And then finally, earlier this month, we announced a funding opportunity to make small grants to institutions to help them develop or modify short-term credential programs in alignment with Workforce Pell. So again, there's sort of a 1-year waiting period before a program can be eligible for Workforce Pell, and there's not really any funding to assist colleges and universities and other training providers with developing Workforce Pell eligible credentials. So we're trying to fill that gap by offering some small grants. This is the last slide I mentioned. I've mentioned several times the recommended definitions for high skill, high wage, and in-demand occupations. And here is what we came up with through the talent assessment. What you see in the green boxes, these are the employment department's existing definitions for high skill, high wage, in demand. So we're recommending moving forward with those definitions with a couple small exceptions. The exception to high wage is for occupations that show strong wage growth potential. So maybe the initial entry level wage doesn't meet the definition of high wage, but if you look at the higher end of that occupation wage in comparison to that lower end of the occupation wage, there's a big difference. There's a big ratio. And so learners might have the potential to move into that high wage band. And then we also are recommending an exception to the in-demand industry or in-demand occupation definition for occupations that are critical to priority sectors in Oregon and comprise a significant amount of employment in those sectors. So that is my implementation update, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any commissioner have questions for Julia?
I do, Mr. Chief.
Okay, Commissioner Dembro will.
Thank you. Julia, thank you. Thanks for this, the work that you're doing. One of the concerns that I'm hearing around the country is whether or not the state has the necessary data infrastructure, to be able to track, the wage growth that will come out of this program. Are we well positioned here in Oregon with our longitudinal system to be able to track those kinds of things, or is that work that we're going to have to try to work on?
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for that question. I think largely, yes, we are in a good position, both through the SLDS, but also just through our data sharing agreements with the Oregon Employment Department. Our research and data team regularly shares data with the Employment Department to do wage matches. And so we already have access to a lot of that information and have processes in place to do that. So one area where we will need additional information, and this is true for a lot of states, is around what's called enhanced wage records. And right now, Oregon's wage records, so the data that we have on employees in Oregon, do not include the occupation for that individual employee. They include the industry, but not the occupation. And that, a couple years into Workforce Pell, I believe it's the 28-29 program year, we will be required to look at job placement in the particular occupation that the credential is intended, and we don't currently have those data. So again, this is something that's very common across the country. Not a ton of states have enhanced wage records, but we're certainly working with other states, and I've been talking to the Employment Department a lot about this.
Thank you. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Chair Hammond. I am wondering how this program will deal with fluctuations in, you're standing up programs or helping institutions develop programs that could then qualify for the Workforce Pell, but how do you deal with fluctuations in high wage and in demand occupations over time? So you get people really interested, stand up program to get people interested in them. They begin the program. Yes, I'm not sure at the timeline. Maybe they're a 2-year program. Is the funding guaranteed to get that certificate, or is it dependent on a year-by-year basis?
That's a great question, Commissioner. These are short-term programs, so shorter than 15 weeks in time. So I wouldn't anticipate like fluctuation really when somebody enters the program and when they exit, that there would be an issue with losing eligibility in that time frame. And certainly as those definitions, or as the high wage data, in demand data shifts, it might cause programs to kind of fall out of eligibility. I think that would happen really on the margins. Those programs that are just making the in-demand list or just making the high wage list would kind of be in danger of that. But it's a great point, and we'll need to figure out, a way to perhaps find some gap fill funding as those programs phase out, or sort of encourage colleges to look out for that ahead of time.
I had a question, and perhaps I'm just not understanding the data correctly, but it seems to me that there's kind of an assumption of the criteria that high demand and high wage are related. And it seems to me that we have a variety of roles in our state that are high demand, but not necessarily high wage. And is there any way in which those can be addressed through this program?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. The federal legislation does say that programs must be high skill, high wage, or in demand. So it's not required for states to only approve programs that meet all three of those criteria. Right now, our recommendation is that programs do meet all three of those criteria in order to be eligible for Workforce Pell, because we want to ensure program quality and that, you know, this federal Pell Grant funding that students are receiving is actually preparing them for employment in a high quality job. So that is our recommendation at this point, but we've heard, you know, feedback from partners questioning that, and we'll continue to examine that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, appreciate the clarification. Anything else for Julie? Thank you so much for this update. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Look forward to students gaining access to this resource. Thank you. We move on to major item, the ARB review.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm going to kick this off. May invite Jim or Tom as questions arise. There's a lot of material and not a lot of time, so I'll do my best to kind of give you an orientation, and then we'll see where the Commission's interest resides for deeper conversation. Just in a nutshell, this is your last scheduled meeting before you will be invited to approve a recommended budget, agency request budget in August. So what your packet contains are really the core of the budget recommendation from staff to the Commission. What you receive from us in August will not look very different than what you have in your packets today. So this is a great opportunity for you to sort of review that, and whether it's at, within the remaining portion of today's meeting or in subsequent email or phone call, ask questions, make sure you understand what you are going to be presented in August, and provide feedback as you see fit. Again, there's a lot of material. I'll use a few of the slides that are contained here within 9.3A. Your packets also include a budget summary that's sort of in spreadsheet form, that's 9.3B. A list of policy option packages with short descriptions, that's 9.3C. And the budget pipeline narrative that several folks have mentioned, that's in draft form, that's included within your packets, is 9.3D. Additionally, I want to orient you to a few materials that were in the Funding and Achievement Subcommittee packet yesterday that are not in your full Commission packet, but are a part of the agency request budget, specifically related to the capital prioritization process for community colleges and public universities. And in the interest of sort of keeping your full Commission packets a little lighter, we didn't put all of that in your full Commission packet, but you are going to be asked in August to adopt a budget recommendation that includes capital requests. And the subcommittee reviewed those carefully yesterday for colleges and universities. They're included in the subcommittee packet, but they're not in your full Commission. So just want to make sure you understand the full scope. I'll run through just a few of these slides and then take questions and discussion. Very quick reminder on the process. This is the beginning of a multi-stage process of developing the 2027-29 state budget for the HECC and for higher education. That concludes about a year from now in the adoption of a legislatively approved budget that goes to the governor for signature. Our role in this process is effectively to advise the governor. Like every other executive branch agency, we produce an agency request budget for her consideration and inclusion within a governor's recommended budget that has to be balanced. So that's where we are, very early in a long process. We've had a number of Commission touch points in this going back to December, started briefing you on the development timeline. We started talking about, through the spring, potential policy option packages. We described the governor's instructions and the limits that we have. We've heard from partners extensively in May on their perspective, their requests, and here we are in June with really your sort of final view of the emerging staff recommendations. I am going to dwell for a moment, this is slide 7, on the governor's instructions, because these create significant, really bracket what the commission is permitted to request within, while adhering to the governor's and Department of Administrative Services instructions for this cycle. You have been directed not to request new resources above the current service level, except in the case of limited policy option packages that qualify for one of the limited exceptions that the governor has made available. The other opportunity that you have is to request new funding within an appropriation, but to offset it by a funding cut somewhere else, so effectively budget neutral. I will just acknowledge that puts the commission in a tough spot, right? Because you are a commission that is created and envisions, in part, advocating for the kind of resources that higher education and workforce require in order to meet state goals. And you are working with and for a governor who has said, this is going to be a very difficult budget. My expectation is that of all state agencies is that you not present budget requests that will be difficult, if not impossible, for the state to meet in the next biennium. The governor did, however, make available to you the option of including within your narrative a description of the medium to long-term needs of the agency and of the sector. And that's what's drafted for you in that budget pipeline narrative that's in your packet as item 9.3D. I'm going to jump ahead. So the remainder of these slides start to break down the emerging agency request budget by sort of item. I'm skipping over major and important parts of the budget just to get to the institutional support, because there's been a lot of discussion of CSL, since you're primarily talking about a CSL budget at this point. How is it determined? We're not going to go into the technical details there, but I do want to give you a picture of where this landed and just and say a few words about current service level. So this is the essentially current service level view of the agency request budget as it currently stands. Starting with the left hand, the first column is the current legislatively approved budget for 2025-27. And now in the second column, you have for the first time in your meeting materials, the final current service level figures for the 2027-29 budget, broken out by public university, community college, OHSU, and debt service. So these represent the state's estimates of the cost of continuing current service level at those institutions. You see no POPs because we have not recommended POPs that would require offsets to other portions of the budget, except in the case of capital construction, which is an area that qualifies for an exception. So that goes back to the capital construction list that we discussed at FNA yesterday. And there is $684 million of new capital funding for your consideration and inclusion within the agency request budget. You should note, because you're looking, some of you seeing this slide for the first time, add 3 zeros to every one of these numbers. These are in thousands. It says that in small print in the upper left hand, but where it says, looks like 1,500,000 for public units, that's actually $1,543 million. So simplified by taking off a few zeros, but you got to add them back in. So it's $684 million of capital construction funding. All right, so current service level matters a lot in this budget. The determination of current service level matters a lot because that's effectively what you're being allowed to request, is the current service level. So we talked about this at the Funding and Achievement Subcommittee yesterday in some detail. There's a whole document in that meeting material, a whole narrative document that sort of unpacks the methodology for establishing current service level for community colleges and public universities. I am going to just use this slide, I think, that shows the recent history of the inflationary increase by sector. So going back to 2021-23, how much has CSL increased biennium to biennium for the public universities, for the community colleges, and then for the sort of standard inflationary rate that we apply across other sort of typical non-state employee costs. So focus on the first two columns here. You can see that this year's, this budget's increase, estimated CSL increase or actual CSL increase for public universities and community colleges is larger than in recent years. In part, that should not be surprising, right? We are in a somewhat higher inflationary environment than we were, at least in 21, 23, I guess there was inflation. So we continue to be in an inflationary environment, let's put it that way. And that's reflected in the 9.3% that we're using for non-state employees, as well as the 9.3% that you see for public universities. Those rates, that 9.3 and 17.8, and that 17.8 definitely jumps out, right, are higher also because of changes to the PERS employer rates that public universities and community colleges are anticipating for the upcoming biennium. Their PERS rates are increasing in both sectors by a lot, and for community colleges, a lot, like really a lot. And there's additional detail on that. And the reasons for that get complicated and technical, and they have to do with the way that community colleges and public universities and the state have managed PERS liabilities going back several decades through the use of borrowing and side some of those strategies are sort of expiring, and because we're in a high interest rate environment, don't continue to be available to the state and to our public employers, and therefore some institutions are seeing quite dramatic increases in their PERS employer rates for the upcoming biennium. And just to, again, the FNA members went through this in detail yesterday, but just to take a look at the expected PERS employer rates for community colleges, you can see the jump here between 2025, 27, and 2027, 29. And if you're not in the weeds of PERS, like what do these numbers mean? It means that for every, it means that employers have to contribute to the PERS system for, let's say, Blue Mountain Community College at the top of the list, additional 25% of the cost of, the salary cost of an employee to support PERS, right? So it increases your employee costs, your personnel costs by 25%. And that's a jump for Blue Mountain from 9% in the current biennium. That's a massive budget impact. So those rates, the jump in those community college rates are being incorporated within the current service level estimate for the community colleges and reflected in that 17% increase in the community college current service level. That is broadly a good thing, right? The current service level estimate is accounting for this projected increase in the employer rates, both at community colleges and at public universities to the expiration of the offsets. I think the final slide I will give you is the summary slide. So if you were to package our agency request budget on one slide, it is this one. It is a $4,703,329,000.30 agency request budget. That's towards the lower right-hand column or lower right-hand portion of this slide. That reflects the current service level plus the POPs and results in the ARB. Just to take it slightly more detail, you actually see on the first line of this a reduction in personnel. That's agency personnel. So that top line, probably the simplest way to try to, from this slide, tease out what portion of this $4+ billion budget is the HECC agency. We will see a reduction in personnel costs, and it reflects a reduction of about 9 FTE at the agency. That is primarily the result of the transfer of positions from HECC to the Oregon Employment Department. So the Oregon Employment Department will see a corresponding increase in their FTE. There's some other things going on there, but that's the main one. The other thing that I'll call to your attention, just because if you sort of scan the POPs list, you see that reduction, and that's the parentheses, the -5 million on the POPs for personnel. You see the special pay increase by 536 million. Special pay is money that we push out, and that POP is primarily the result of this proposed capital investment that qualified for the exception. So where's the new money? Where's the POP money? I thought we couldn't ask for new money. It's primarily capital projects minus the shift in WIOA funding, federal funding, that we're transferring to OED along with our staff. So that's how you get to roughly a $536 million increase in our state support from CSL. CSL doesn't take into account any of last biennium's capital spending, so this is actually less of an increase than that, but we start from 0 on the capital side in the current service level budget. So overall, a $4.7 billion agency request budget that is about $254 million higher than the LAD from last cycle, due primarily to the big requests that we're making on capital, not all of which is likely to be funded by the legislature. That's the summary. Wow. Questions, comments, and huge credit. I can do this in 15 minutes or whatever it took because we have an amazing staff. Jim Pinkard, Tom Reel, Courtney Zed.
Can we just clap?
Zed. Sarah Zed, our new Chief Fiscal Officer. We just hired Courtney. We're excited about her. And they and their teams have put all of this together, and then I just read the simple slides and don't deserve any of the credit.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I just had a couple of questions for Ben.
Yes.
Yeah, Ben, we've had considerable discussion on CSL today, so I'm going to move to a different area. On capital, do we know if the Treasurer's Debt Policy Advisory Board, based on current forecasts, has indicated that the state has the room to budget all the projects that we are putting forward, even though we're not not in any way the ultimate decision maker on these? The governor and the legislature are.
Either we don't know or the answer is no.
Okay.
He's shaking his head no, which could mean we don't know, or could mean no.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Second, just for the sake of understanding, the governor does have the authority to not forward a project to the legislature, correct? And the legislature has the authority, obviously, not to fund a project or to actually restore a project that the governor may have not forwarded.
Yeah, Commissioner Bill and I, it's a really important question. Our capital recommendations historically have had a strong influence on the projects the governor has recommended and a strong influence on the projects that the legislature has chosen to fund. But it's not required, and nor has it been followed 100% of the time by either governors or legislature.
Thank you.
And Jim, did you want to answer the question about that capacity?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Jim Pinkard, Secretary of Finance and Capital. Just wanted to say we don't yet know what that existing capacity next biennium will be for state-backed bonding and by type of bond. We just haven't had that clarity yet received from the Treasurer.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lawson.
Yeah, to touch on that, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Is there any chance we have like an estimated time frame of when we could get that information, or sorry, when the agency staff would receive that information, just so I can think about when it might be presented to us?
Probably later in the fall, but I'll heavily caution you with expectations by saying that the legislature will get that information. There's no guarantee in terms of how they're allocated across the statewide enterprise. In some sessions, there's more of a need for county courthouses and local infrastructure. In some sessions, there's more of a need for natural resources, wildfire response, and other related infrastructure issues. So it's very difficult to discern like what allocation the higher education space of the state enterprise might receive. So we can certainly share whatever we receive, but I'm not convinced that will answer many of the questions you might have.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Richard Devlin.
And if Jim could follow up on this too, is it also depends upon what the revenue forecasts are in the future. Because if the revenue forecasts go down significantly, the capacity will diminish, and in some cases has gone away. Actually, there was one biennium when we largely did not have any capacity.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? I have a little technical one. I noticed the debt retirement amount doesn't change at all. Is that because we know it doesn't change, or we just don't know the extent to it? Because I would assume we haven't added any debt or retired any debt, which I find interesting.
That's a really good question and a sharp eye. We, during CSL, typically leave it alone because then later on in the budget process in a later phase is when we work with our partners.
Well, that's what I assume. They'll fill that in at some point. But
yeah,
exactly. Thank you for clarifying. Yeah. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have two questions for staff and then one clarification from testimony heard this morning. Question one, the sustainability report characterizes all 4 technical and regional universities as struggling, and each of today's evaluations credits the 2023 to 2025 targeted sustainability investments with measurable returns. Oregon Tech projects roughly $3.9 million back on a $2.3 million investment. The budget phases the TRU Sustainability Lab around $11.1 million to zero. Is there any vehicle left for us in this budget for that, other than the pipeline narrative, I guess, if the commission wanted to propose a compliant offset to restore part of that? That's something that is really important to me.
Yeah, I mean, Commissioner Lawson's referring to one-time funding that the HECC received during a prior legislative session to support the TRUs and PSU in achieving greater budget stability through investments that we help to sort of steer dollars towards. And you're correct that that funding, which was initially 25 million, say, is not in our current service level budget because it was intended to be one time. So to request additional funding of that sort would require, as you suggested, an offset by reducing funding in other portions of the HECC budget. We have invited the commission and the subcommittee at prior meetings to suggest areas where you are interested in seeing new investment offset by cuts elsewhere. We have not heard enough support from that from the commission for those cuts to present an option of that nature to you here.
How much support would you need to hear from the commission for that?
At this point, I'll just be very candid. At this point, it would be quite difficult for us to make that kind of adjustment to the emerging ARB. I think if you're thinking about sort of future cycles and the way the commission can engage, I think what we didn't hear this time, which we would have, I think, needed to hear, is a sense from at least several commissioners around a specific area for cuts that you want us to explore in order to bring back an option for new investment. And we just didn't